Okay, so the meeting is now called to order. I'm Tara Rodriguez, Director of the Division of School and Program Improvement. I want to welcome all of you to our first meeting of the Title I Committee of Practitioners of the 2020 to 2021 school year. We have several new members joining the group, and I want to welcome you as well as our returning members. We're going to get started with some very basic introductions in which I'm just going to go down the membership list to see who's joining us this morning. And then later we'll, in the agenda, you may have seen that we'll have some more time for more in-depth discussion and speaking about roles and so on. So this will just be the basic introduction to get us started. So I'm just going to go down the list and just let me know if you are here. Sarah Aiken.
Hi, I'm here.
Carrie Ballinger.
Yes, I'm here.
Brian Boland.
I'm here.
Brian Coleman.
Present.
Dustin Combs. Christina Dalton.
I'm here.
Maria Diaz Ramos. Laura Grant. Susan Greer. Diane Hatfield.
Present.
Michael Hay.
Good morning, I'm here.
Lisa Hibbs. David Milanti.
I'm here.
Carrie Riggs. Lisa Schools. Tim Spencer. And Cheryl Tanner.
Here.
All right, welcome everybody again. Thank you so much for being here. I'm glad to see all of you. And so let's do, I want to mention two other people, and Miss Hibbs is just now joining the meeting as well. Good morning, Miss Hibbs.
Good morning.
Okay, and then there's a couple of people, additional people on the call right now. We've got Kelly Foster, who's going to be presenting, Jennifer Stafford. Tanya Hickman is on to, and Regina Barrett are on temporarily to provide some technical support. Regina will probably hop off here as soon as we get started. And Tanya will be staying longer, perhaps for the duration, just to make sure we have the support we need, technically speaking. All right, so let's go ahead and very briefly go over today's agenda. So we have gone over our call to order and our introductions. First on our agenda, Dr. Kelly Foster, Associate Commissioner in the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support, will be speaking about changes to 703 KAR 5280, which are our school improvement procedures. And I emailed you a copy of that regulation last week. Then we will have Jennifer Stafford, who's the Director of the Division of Assessment and Accountability Support. She'll be talking to us about Senate Bill 158 and amendments to 703 KAR 5270, which is our Kentucky accountability system. Then we'll back up just a little bit, and I'm going to provide an overview of Title I Parts A, C, and D. That's a very high-level, short presentation. And then we're going to have some time for you all to provide us some feedback and discussion on the COVID-related guidance that KDE released for Title I to help provide support to districts during the pandemic. And then we will adjourn after that. So without further ado, Kelly, would you like to speak with us first? Kelly, you may be on mute, Kelly.
Sorry, I wasn't following the rules. Good morning. It's great to be with you guys. You would think, since I've been doing this since about March 16th, I would know how to have the camera on and the mute button off, but I think we all struggle with that on a daily basis. I appreciate being able to share some information today with you guys around school improvement. And so what I'm going to do first is share my screen with you guys. And let's see. Bear with me. Okay, Tara, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. And so I will start. Just a little background information for you guys is that we are making some changes to our school improvement reg KAR 5:280 based on Senate Bill 158, which was passed in this last legislative session. And Senate Bill 158 deals with some changes around school improvement as well as assessment and accountability. And Jennifer Stafford's also going to talk to some changes based on that law that was passed in the spring in her presentation. So we'll go ahead and get started. I have presented this information already to SCAC, which is the Assessment and Accountability Work Group or Advisory Group. I have presented to LSAC. I'll be presenting to them again tomorrow, and it has gone in front of the Kentucky Board of Education once for a first reading. So everyone is probably a little bit familiar with Essa. And Essa is the federal law. Tara, are you seeing just one slide, or are you seeing a split screen?
I'm seeing the one slide.
Okay, great. So Essa went into effect, and underneath the federal law, they talk about CSI schools, TSI schools, and ATSI schools. And these schools replace what was formerly known as priority schools. And so CSI schools, you can see the definition for that there in the slide, and you'll have these slides afterwards. And so basically a CSI school is a school, a Title I school that is performing as poorly as all other Title I schools in the bottom 5%. And we do not have any statutory flexibility in Kentucky for that definition of CSI, but we do have some flexibility around ATSI. And the ATSI stands for Additional Targeted Support. And everything in ATSI is looking at subgroup performance. And we'll talk a little bit about that moving forward. So previously, before Senate Bill 158 was passed last spring, Senate Bill 1 in 2017 didn't actually align with the federal law. And so one of the positives of Senate Bill 158 is that it did align state law with federal law. And that's extremely important for Kentucky, because in order for us to receive the Title I federal funds for our schools and districts, we have to be in compliance. And so it was extremely important that in the legislation, Senate Bill 158, that we were able to work with the legislature and make sure that what they had in the law aligned to the language in Essa. So you can see in the fall of 2018, 418 schools were identified for additional targeted support, and 10 of those schools remained identified for 2021. And to date, no schools have been identified for TSI. Things are a little crazy right now, as we all know. And so schools did not take the end of the year assessment that's required federally back in the spring of 20. So we did not identify any schools for TSI, CSI, or ATSI in the fall of 20. And that is all 50 states. No one, the feds gave us a waiver, obviously, so no one was identified for any of these categories under federal law. And if you were a school or district that were already receiving services, then you continued to receive the extra support for the 2021 school year. All right, so as I mentioned before, Senate Bill 175, I think that should say Senate Bill 1 in 2019 talked about Essa, and then 158, we were able to clean up that language. And so here's what it says in Senate Bill 158. Once again, why we're making these changes in our school improvement reg. Beginning with the 2021 school year and annually thereafter, the department shall identify a school for targeted support and improvement if the school has one or more of the same subgroups defined by Essa, whose performance in the state accountability system by level is at or below that of all students in any of the lowest performing 5% of all schools for 3 consecutive years. So if a school had a subgroup, let's just say free and reduced, if that subgroup of free and reduced had performed as poorly as the bottom 5% of all schools for 3 years in a row, then they would be identified targeted support and improvement. And then the legislation in 158 also deals with beginning with 21-22 school year and every 3 years thereafter. The department shall identify a school for additional targeted support and improvement if the school has one or more subgroups as defined by Essa who is performing in the state accountability system by level, and by level means elementary, middle, or high, at or below the summative performance of all students in any of the lowest performing 5% of schools. So that language was a good cleanup, and now that matches the federal law. And so a couple other changes in 158 that we'll take a look at. TSI, as I mentioned before, will begin being identified annually in the 2021 school year for 3 consecutive years, and ATSI will be identified every 3 years beginning in the 21-22 school year. Now, once again, keep in mind, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and Ed has not really provided us with any true guidance yet on if there's going to be relief in the fall, or excuse me, in the spring of 21 for accountability. So things may change. We just kind of have to hang tight, but this is what is the alignment of dates in the law. And then the big changes around 158, which are in our school improvement reg, is it moves the identification of CSI schools to every 3 years. So in the past, CSI schools were identified every year. In this legislative change, every 3 years, beginning with the 21-22 school year, those CSI schools will be identified. Part of being identified as a CSI schools requires a audit, a diagnostic review, and so KDE will be in charge of conducting all those. An appeal process has been put back in this legislation. It had been in previously and then was removed in Senate Bill 1, 2017, but that appeals process has been put back in case a principal feels like anything in an audit is inaccurate. And then this also mandates turnaround efforts in CSI schools be led by an entity that has been approved by the Kentucky Board of Education. And it also requires KDE to submit an annual report to the Interim Joint Committee on Education regarding the performance of turnaround vendors beginning in 2023. So those changes in our school improvement reg, which you have a copy of, are due to the new pieces of legislation. And I'll be glad to take any questions that you have, if you have any at this time. As I mentioned previously, I have presented this to SCAC and to LSAC and to the State Board of Education once, and we'll be presenting to LSAC again tomorrow and back to the State Board for the final approval on the middle of December. It's a Wednesday. I'm not sure the date right off the top of my head. December, I'm looking. December 2nd. So any questions or comments? I think all the changes, there are minor changes being made to the reg, but I do think they are the right changes for number one, because everything now aligns with federal law, which is extremely important to ensure that we'll receive our federal dollars for our schools. And then two, I think some things maybe had been stripped out of some things that really target fairness, like the appeal process had been stripped through different pieces of legislation, and now they're back in. So I don't have any angst about any of the changes. Well, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Foster. All right. Does anybody have any comments or questions, discussion that they want to offer about the presentation? And if anything comes up later, if any questions come to mind, I'm happy to take note of those and follow up with you all later through an email with anything that we need to research or get back to you on. All right, if nobody has anything they wanted to ask about the school improvement regulation, then we will go ahead and move to our next agenda item, which is the changes and amendments to the accountability system with Jennifer Stafford, the Director of the Division of Assessment and Accountability Support.
Thank you, Tara. Good morning.
Good
Can
morning.
everyone hear me? Oh, good. I am going to share a presentation. First of all, good morning to everyone. I'm so glad to see you all in person. I recognize some of your faces and names, so it's good to see. It's good to see your faces. We are living on this Teams application right now, and we don't always get to enjoy seeing everyone's faces. So thank you for turning on your cameras and being able to see you. So I hope everybody is doing well and staying safe. A lot of changes, as Dr. Foster just mentioned, we have a lot of changes brought about by Senate Bill 158. I'm Jennifer Stafford. I'm the Director in the Division of Assessment and Accountability Support in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. And as you can imagine, the changes that Senate Bill 158 brought to the state school accountability system was significant. We have a lot of changes, and we've talked with the Board of Education a couple of times. We had some introduction in August. We had another introduction to accountability in October, where we brought about the possibility of changes and what needed to occur to get to the steps that we have a new accountability system yet again. In November, earlier this month, we had an accountability working session, and it was really good. We had members were engaged and active participants in the discussion, and they provided guidance in many aspects toward the changes in the accountability system. Where they did not provide changes or direct guidance, they gave some conceptual ideas and thoughts on how the accountability system should be impacted by the changes, and asked the department to then come back in December with recommendations as well as a draft regulation. Those are some of the pieces that I'd like to discuss with you this morning, is to talk about the changes in that accountability regulation, particularly in 3 or 4 different really main areas of change. In December, we'll take to them the accountability, a draft. And from what I understand, there is some consideration by the Board of Education to change their board policy from having 2 reads of a regulation down to just 1. So I've written here on the slide in February, where we had originally thought there was a second read, that the possible removal of that second read to that accountability system, so regulation. So we could be moving from 2 reads down to 1, and a regulation would then move from the first read into public comment period, and then a statement of consideration, and then on to the legislative bodies in legislative work toward a finalized regulation. So we'll see. We're looking forward to that discussion with the board. At the same time, they also want to talk about assessment, both for the current year, spring 21, as well as 21 and beyond, in that accountability in state testing. So at this point, we do not have a waiver from the U.S. Department of Education. We have a letter that the current Secretary of Education and Workforce sent Secretary DeVos, and said that states should prepare for and be ready to administer state tests. So the discussion at the board meeting in December will be a bit about the approach to state testing and a design discussion. The board is interested in possibly changing the state test and having a different type of assessment. So we want to have these discussions along the way about the state assessments and the assessment moving forward beyond 21. So those are some high-level topics. When we talk about Senate Bill 158 that Dr. Foster mentioned earlier, it did change the accountability system. It changed school improvement provisions, as well as the graduation requirements, and authorized other pieces within that regulation that was signed into law by the governor on April 24th. So the regulation or the statute was signed during the pandemic, but it was developed prior to the pandemic. So some of the pieces of it may change as we move forward, as we know, as impacted by the state assessments because of the fact that we did not have state assessment this past year. It could impact some of those timelines. So just a high level of Senate Bill 158, it modifies the components of the statewide accountability system. Specifically, on each of the state indicators, it's evaluated on status and change. And the statute defines those terms of status and change very specifically, where status is that current year performance, which is what we've always done in Kentucky since accountability was started in the 90s. But it does bring into the accountability system this idea of change. And change is the difference on those indicators from the prior year to the current year. It also specifies that the overall performance of the school or district be brought together into an overall performance using status and change, and it requires that each of those be displayed in an online dashboard. We've done this for many years. Again, we bring everything together into an overall performance. Now, I'll note for you that a lot of the bill in the accountability system was based on the California model. I think that there was interest and visitation to California and discussion with the California Department of Education on their accountability system. And so our accountability system was in terms of status and change was patterned from that accountability system in California. The significant difference between California and Kentucky is the fact that we can bring everything to an overall performance. So when we talk in a few minutes that we'll talk about some weighting, that weight is different than California. In those implementation of dates in the accountability system, that could change because of the current situation we're in with the pandemic. And then Dr. Foster mentioned just a few minutes ago the 3 years of performance used when identifying the lowest of 5% of schools. And then clarifies that the superintendent, principal, and school district can appeal the performance judgment. The bill was very specific. In previous statutes that we've had over the past several years, it's not been as prescriptive as it was with Senate Bill 158. So the performance is based on these measures that are both academic and school quality indicators. And they included the word exclusively. So the indicators shall exclusively include. So when we interpret that word exclusively to mean these are the only ones that can be included in school district accountability. So that is state assessment results, and those would include reading, math, science, social studies, writing, as well as the editing mechanics and on-demand writing. They elevated the progress toward achieving English language proficiency by our English learners. In the prior system, that progress was included at the elementary and middle schools in growth, as well as at the high school in transition readiness. So it was embedded in both of those previous indicators with Senate Bill 158 that did elevate that progress toward achieving English proficiency to its own indicator. And then the quality of school climate and safety remains, as well as high school graduation remains. And then they've changed the terminology of transition readiness from transition readiness to post-secondary readiness. So there are some limitations there with that word exclusively in that that language. So with the regulation, because the statute made changes, then that puts the accountability regulation out of alignment with the statute. So when there's a change in statute, there has to be a change in the regulation to align to those changes. So the summary of the changes that are being brought forward to the Kentucky Board of Education in December is that alignment of the language in the requirements is Senate Bill 158. So where it says, like, for example, the state assessment results for reading and math. Well, previously it was called Proficiency. Previously it was for science, social studies, and writing, it was called Separate Academic Indicator. So a lot of the changes that are in the regulation are because of the language change or just those terminology changes. For example, transition readiness is now post-secondary readiness. So there's a lot of changes in the regulation just that are technical in nature to align with that language. Other alignment language is in the process for dual credit. Dual credit in the past has said that it should be 6 hours, and the department is not able to determine how many hours that a student gets for dual credit. So the change in the regulation language aligns with the way that the Office of Career and Technical Education is collecting those credits. So actually it says credits instead of hours, but there's really no difference in the collection process or that approval process for that dual credit. Also, recommendations for the Kentucky Board of Education on the discussion that we had in earlier November are on those pieces of bringing status and change together, the combining of the weights, and then how to include some of those English learner progress indicators and those flexibilities. And then with the in count, we had a good discussion on the in count with the Kentucky Board of Education in November, and wanted to share some of that discussion with you today. So let's talk about those. We talked about the status and change, because that's really going to be a really big different piece for us in Kentucky, because we've had status again for many years, but now we have to bring together this idea of status change. So I want to introduce to you what we're calling a 5x5 colored table. So the 5x5 colored table just does bring together some of the pieces of status and change into the accountability system. Now, with each of the indicators, there will be a 5x5 colored table on each of the indicators. So just think of state assessment results in reading and math. It will have a 5x5 table that may look different than, say, for example, the graduation rate table. It may look different than the quality of school climate and safety indicator. So this 5x5 colored table represents one table, but it will be used and possibly aligned to the other indicators. So how it works is the status is over here on the left-hand side. So status, you can see by statute language, it is very high to very low. So you can see status could either be very high in current year, medium in current year, low in current year, or very low in current year. And then across the top is the change. So you can see that, again, by language from the statute, it's from decline significantly to increase significantly. So if you look at it, then you can see that the possibilities are decline significantly from prior year, declined from prior year, maintained from prior year, increased from prior year, and increased from significantly from prior year. So the way that you use the table is, it's color coded, and this would be some reporting aspect of the indicator. So for example, if we were talking about state assessment results in reading and math, for a school in the current year that had status of very high, but they declined significantly from the prior year, then they would be reported in that color-coded dashboard on the school report card as that for that indicator for state assessment results in reading and math, that school's performance would be yellow. If, again, that very high performance on the state assessment results in reading and math may be maintained from the prior year, so that you would go over, 3 boxes. So from very high in current year to maintained in prior year. So you would go down from the maintained from prior year, and you would see that intersection of row and column would be blue. So here in this, in that blue box, I'm sorry, I clicked it and it moved on me. So you can see how the color-coded table works. If the school was, for example, very low in the current year, so you move all the way down to that last row and decline significantly from the prior year. So you would see that's box A here. So that would be red in the color-coded dashboard on the school report card. So you can see how the color-coded table works. So the Board of Education asked the department to come back with a recommendation of the colored tables. And you can see that we have here on the left-hand side the recommended table, and then the alternative table on the right. So the one on the left, the one that we were just looking at, is the recommended from the department. Now let me highlight for you some of the features of both tables, and then I'll point out the differences. Both tables have the same number of blue boxes and red boxes. So there's an equal opportunity for performance for a reported category of blue and red. You'll also see that there is a yellow that runs diagonal. So there's some symmetry here on each of the tables. The difference comes in when you look at that medium row. So let's everybody look at the medium row. And I'm going to first talk about the recommended, and then we can talk about the alternative. So for the schools that are medium in the current year and declined, that would be reported as an orange. But then the difference comes in when we get to medium in current year and declined. In the recommended, you can see that we are recommending that it is orange or be reported as orange. In the alternative, then you can see that the medium but declined from prior year would be a yellow. Moving along to the recommended, medium in current year and maintain is the same in both charts, where it's both yellow. But then when you get to medium in current year and increased from prior year, in the recommended, it's green. So that indicator, whatever indicator that would be reported as a green. In the alternative, that same medium in current year and increased would be a yellow. And then those 3 boxes right there in the center of that table, of those tables, are the differences, because all other aspects of the table are the same. So let me pause at this point and see if there's any questions or any thoughts that the committee members would have on the recommended or alternative table. And Tara, is there any, I can't see chat right now. So is there any comments in chat?
No, I do not believe there are.
Okay. Let's see.
No,
Okay.
I don't see anything.
All right. Okay. Well, if anyone has comments on these, the differences between these color-coded tables, please feel free to type in chat or let me know. If not, we're going to move on to the performance and combining the indicators to generate an overall designation. So again, we'll bring together each of those indicators that I mentioned before: state assessment results, progress on English language proficiency, quality of soil, climate and safety, graduation rate, and transition readiness. We'll bring all of those into an overall performance. And as Kelly, Dr. Foster mentioned, we'll use that overall performance then level to identify the bottom 5% in those schools identified for additional targeted support and then targeted support. So you can imagine that all schools will be put on the same scale, and then the bottom 5% will be identified as comprehensive support and improvement. So that last bullet there, Senate Bill 158 requires that all schools receive an overall designation. And what the board directed us and provided guidance is they didn't want that overall designation to be a star any longer. So the recommendation from the board is to make that overall designation color-coded. So you can imagine that the bottom will be red, the next line up would be, next school performance up would be orange, yellow, green, and the top would be blue. So that overall here it is. The overall performance rating for elementary, middle, and high schools will be reported using this color-coded system to communicate the performance of schools from lowest being red to highest being blue. And again, that is the color coding will replace the stars from the prior accountability system.
Jennifer,
Yes.
can I interrupt real quick? There was a question in the chat, and I think you might have already addressed it, but if you want to speak again to the question says, what is the reasoning for the differences in the colors?
I'm going to assume that that's back here on the table. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe they're talking about the colors in the table. What is the reasoning, the reasoning for the differences in the colors?
So looking at the medium, specifically the medium row, when our groups that we've been in front of already, which include our SCAC, our School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Committee, as well as some of our DAC advisory members, they like the distinction that it makes between the schools that declined and increased. Having the schools that are medium and declined the same color of yellow that is the same as schools that increased, they felt like that the recommended table gives a little bit more distinction between those two. Because when you look at a yellow, in the recommended, it goes from box C up in that top left-hand side, very high, to go down to box D in the lower right-hand side. It's very low in current year, but increased significantly. So just saying you're yellow isn't enough. You got to be able to look at the relationship in that school for status and change. So yellow doesn't mean the same. So yellow and very high, they could have decreased significantly, and yellow and very low means they increase significantly. So those colors don't have a specific meaning, they just have value, and the description is between the relationship of status and change within that indicator.
And Jennifer, I'm
Yes.
sorry, there's a follow-up question. So the question says, I meant the two changes from orange in recommended to orange to yellow in alternative and green to yellow. So more specifically, the two changes from orange in recommended to orange to yellow in alternative and green to yellow.
So specifically in the recommended one, it's more distinct and gives a more of a cautionary measure from that yellow in the decline from prior year to orange. So just more of a cautionary color there, if you will, orange, and then valuing the increase of the increase from medium in current year to increase from prior year. So giving that value in that positive, more positive reinforcement of that color. And again, the colors are values. They're values that you can look at because there will be numbers behind these colors. So you can there will be numbers within that. So when we get to have a standard setting and have those performance of those indicators established, and we have Kentucky educators come in, they will set the range of the colors. So the way that it's demonstrated here is that each box and each cell are kind of equal. But we know when we get to standard setting that some boxes may have a larger range than others. So you can assume that some scales or some colors within that scale will be larger than others within there. Good questions.
And they said thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for the question. Okay, so then again, we are talking about bringing all this together into an overall scores, and the board gave several guiding concepts and guiding thoughts on overall accountability weights. So one thing that is a definite change that you will notice from the prior system is they wanted the elementary weights different from the middle school weights than the high school weights. So previously we had had elementary and middle school weights and then high school weights. With this, their guidance was that they wanted to see differences in reading and math specifically at elementary than they did middle schools. Other guiding concepts that they talked through was the fact that they wanted more weight in reading and math and than they did in science and social studies at the earlier grades, but more of an equal weight within the middle schools. And then you can see at the high schools where the proposed accountability weights may land. And again, these are going forward in the regulation for the board to discuss in December. These, and again, I've put in here that these are proposed overall accountability weights. I expect that the board to have some really robust conversation on this piece when we get to the board meeting in December. So these are, again, just a starting point, and you can see some of the value that is within these measures. One other note that I'll make, it's not on the slide, but the U.S. Department of Education in the Every Student Succeeds Act puts specifications on the weights. So at high school, for example, at high school, reading and math and graduation rate has to be more than 50%. So that's the reason that you see the 45 at high schools and the graduation at 6, because that's more than 50. It's 51. So that combination of reading and math and graduation at the high school has to be more than 50%. The same is at for elementaries and middle schools, that the reading and math and the English learner has to be more than 50%. So it's not just a wide open, you can do anything that you want. There are guidelines and parameters that have to be met within that ESSA. So let me pause and see. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Might I ask a question right here?
Absolutely.
So you have post-secondary readiness at 20%,
Yes.
and they've changed the terminology for this. At what point does CTE get involved? What role is that going to play?
So these, again, we're looking forward to the discussion at the board meeting. CTE in the Office of Career and Technical Education did have input on this. We talked through some of the changes on the post-secondary. And so let's just talk just a little bit about why that was reduced a little bit, other than the fact that the board had given those directions. So for transition readiness, you recall that we've now had to add, because of the U.S. Department of Education, we had to include non-grade 12 graduates, right? Non-graduates at grade 12. So that's going to make it harder, a little harder. And also some impact on that is the fact that in the statute, with the exclusively, in the statute does not include exceptional work experience. So the option for exceptional work experience to be achieved goes away with this new transition or new post-secondary readiness measure. So those two pieces could impact the overall measure. And so with that, we had thought that reduce that measure may be an appropriate direction to go. But again, these are just a discussion to be taken forward with the board. And I'd love to hear your comment.
I'll wait till you finish and make a more educated assessment at that point.
Well, I'm going to go on to the next, because I'm looking at my time, and I've got just a few more minutes, about 10 more minutes here. So these next few slides are demonstration of the past weight to the proposed weights. So you can see that we took into account the board's direction to put more emphasis on reading and math at the earlier grades, more equalized weight for science, social studies, and writing. Our Lieutenant Governor, she wanted more emphasis on science, social studies, and writing. That was one of the comments that she made. And so you can see kind of where those weights kind of landed. And again, these are a starting point for discussion with the board. For progress toward English language proficiency, I want to make a note here that in discussion with the U.S. Department of Education, as well as some drafters of Senate Bill 158, there is a little difference in status and change for the English learner progress. So with all the other indicators, it's going to be the status is going to be the current year performance, and change is going to be that comparison between the current year to the prior year. That's not going to work and align to ESSA. So the approach that we're taking with this English learner progress indicator only is that the status for English learners is really going to be a growth measure on our English language proficiency exam for the individual students. So how we will calculate status on English learner proficiency will be the student's current year compared to the student's prior year individual performance on the access test. So that value table that we've used previously, that value table will be used in that status component. Now, the change will be consistent with Senate Bill 158 in the fact that the status will be the change on the school indicator from one year to the next. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that that slight tweak to status in the English learner progress will be included in order to align to the Every Student Succeeds Act. So just a little bit of variance on 158. The board directed us to include and consider the 3 factors of characteristics from our English learners into the accountability system. And those 3 are the student age upon initially enrolling in the U.S. public school, the degree of English language proficiency on entering, and the degree of interrupted schooling. So those, the change that you will see in the accountability regulation is that the wording will be from a may to a shall. So the department shall include these flexibilities into the accountability system. So the current approach that we're going to go to the U.S. Department of Education and propose to them is to create alternative growth value tables. So you could imagine that the growth value table for our status now, and then different growth value tables for this measure, bringing in these characteristics of our English learners. Last piece, and the most controversial piece, is the minimum N count. The recommended minimum N count from the department is that it's changed to an N count of 30 per school. Now, Senate Bill 158 did have a amendment at one point that changed the minimum N from a 10 count to a 30 count. That did not make it into the final statute. The board discussed it, and the emphasis that they wanted to put is on the reliability. The more students that you have included into an indicator or a student group, the more reliable it will be. And it's like when you're thinking about the minimum N, it's like a teeter-totter, kind of, where do you want to lie? Do you want to lie on more reliability but less inclusion? Because the higher you go in the number of students required, the less inclusive the system begins to be. So to implement that minimum N count to 30 for school and student group is going to be a discussion to have at the board. But again, from the department, it's coming forward as a recommendation. However, we'll still continue to report in the school report card at an N count of 10, so that the groups and indicators going into accountability may be 30, but to report would still be at 10 in the school report card. And again, that's by level, as Kelly indicated earlier in her statements. So how does that change? What does that do for an indicator? So the minimum N, it impacts the overall accountability in 2 ways. First, the inclusion of the indicator, and then the second is the identification of the group for ATSI and TSI. So moving to an N count of 30 will impact accountability. So let's look at this example. So this is a whole school, and that's the recommended that we look at whole school for all students of 30 students. So if you have the school, and I'm looking at the example above the line, so a school that has a grade 3 of 5 students, a grade 4 of 10, and a grade 5 of 25, if you add all those total students up, it exceeds 30 students, and the reading and math at grades 3 through 5 will be included, is an indicator. If we have a smaller school below that line that has a grade 5 that only has 5 students, a grade 4 that has 10, and a grade 5 that has 5, then that indicator would not be included in accountability. So that the school or district would not get that state assessment results for reading and math into their accountability. The state assessment results in science, social studies, and writing impacts only 2 grades. And this is a grade 4 and 5 example, but then you can think about at the elementary, you can think of it at the middle school as well as high school, and see that, you know, it would be the same type of example, because in middle school, it's grade 7 and 8. And then at high school, it's grades, grade 11, it's actually just grade 11, because science, social studies, and writing are administered at grade 11. So you would think about the whole school having an in count of 30 students. So in the example above the line, we have an elementary example with grade 4 of 35 students and grade 5 of 5 students. That would exceed the total students, so the indicator would be included. Below the line, you would have only 10 students total in grades 4 and 5, and that indicator would not be included in accountability. Now, so thinking through that, the 5 students would contribute to the overall indicator for science as well as social studies. So there are some advantages to raising that in count to 30, but there's also other impacts to raising that to 30 for total overall school. So, and that's what I was trying to get to with this example, with only 5 students at grade 5. So let me pause there, because that's a lot of information. Christina, you look like you have a question.
No, this is my first meeting, so some of this information is new for me, so I'm just trying to take it all in.
Sure. And it's pretty detailed and deep, but I wanted to be as transparent and open with the discussion, because I value your feedback and appreciate any comments.
So, you know, I'm on school board in Southgate Independent, and we are a small preschool to 8 independent school. And I'm not sure that this would occur, but if we would have 2 grades back to back that had 14 students in each, and they didn't exceed 28, then the reading and math or the science and social studies would not be reported.
So you would have to think by indicator, because for reading and math are administered at all grade levels 3 through 8 and once at the high school. So if you had for reading and math, you would have to look at all 3 grades. If in this elementary example, it's 3, 4, and 5. In middle school, it's 6, 7, and 8. And then in high school, it's grade 10. So you would have to look at each of those grades in combination for reading and math. For science, social studies, and writing, those are only given once per grade span. So per our state statute, science, social studies, and writing given once. So in this elementary example, science is given at grade 4, social studies and writing are given at grade 5. So the inclusion, you would have to count all the grade levels at that level to get the total number of students assessed.
So it's possible, not likely with reading and math, but it could be
That's right.
possible with
That's correct.
science and social studies if they were 2 small grades. Those would be super small grades, but not unheard of.
That's correct.
That would be under 30. And then they would not have accountability scores. And no matter how small the grades have been, there has always been a score reported in the past.
Okay. Yes. So that's exactly right. The way that you're thinking about it for that. Now, we have a phrase in the regulation, and we've had that for years, that says if a school or district misses or doesn't have a component of the accountability system, then that weight is distributed proportionally to the other indicators. So whatever that weight ends up being for the state assessment results for science, social studies, and writing, say it's 45%, then it would be distributed to the other measures that the school does have. For example, reading and math, English proficiency, or quality of school climate and safety.
Thank you.
So that weight that they would not receive, or that accountability for that science, social studies, and writing, would be redistributed to the others. Okay. Any other questions? Well, if you do have questions, you are welcome to share those with Tara. And Tara, if you get questions throughout the day, welcome to share those with me, and I'll be happy to respond.
I will certainly do that. Yes, we may have a few more come in, but I will send any comments or questions your way.
All right. Thank you. And thank you. Each of you all for being here, and I wish you a happy holidays. Please stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really appreciate your spending time with us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
All right. Well, let's go on, and we'll go on to our next agenda item. And that is going to be, what we're going to do is to take a couple of steps back. I know we've got some new members on the committee, and I'm going to show you just a very high level overview of Title I Parts A, C, and D. So we're the Title I Committee of Practitioners, and that Title I is actually got 3 parts to it. So I'm going to do just a high-level overview and see if you have any questions about that. That will be our next agenda item. So give me just a minute to share the screen. If you have any questions while I'm presenting on the high-level overview, please feel free to interrupt if you would like, if there's something that you see that you have a question about, or you can wait till the end, whichever one is easiest for you, or whichever one is your preference. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so let's just back up kind of towards the beginning and talk a little bit about the role of this committee. This committee's purpose is to advise KDE in carrying out its responsibilities under Title I of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act. It is a statutory requirement that we have this committee in place. And the duties of committee members are these 4 items here, but there could be others as well. But to attend meetings, to advise on policy decisions, to advise on proposed or final state regulations related to Title I, such as the 2 presentations you just saw, and to review and revise technical assistance documents and publications that we might be working on or have in the works. The committee members are Kentucky residents who have knowledge of and or demonstrated experience in implementing the provisions of federal law pertaining to Title I. And there are some benefits of participating on this committee. Serving on it allows you to perform a state-level advisory role, providing direct input on state policy and guidance to improve education in Kentucky. And it affords you the opportunity to share your expertise with and learn from others who desire to impact Title I and general education. And we do have a website up. I believe I sent it in an email. It was a while back, but we do have a website on the KDE. We have a page on the KDE website that talks more about the Committee of Practitioners. List is posted there, and some previous agendas are also posted. So here is our overview of Title I, Parts A, C, and D. The elementary and secondary, and I'll just say this as well. I know this will be review for some of you who are returning members, but hopefully it'll be a good review and will help some of our new members kind of put into context some of the information you've already received. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was enacted December 10th, 2015. That is our statute where we find Title I, Parts A, C, and D. And it includes Title I, Part A, which is titled Improving the Academic Achievement of the Disadvantaged, and it includes school improvement, which is the regulation that Kelly Foster was telling you about at the beginning, and the accountability requirements, which Jennifer Stafford shared with you. So that's all in Title I, Part A. Title I, Part C is the education of migratory children. And Title I, Part B is Part D is the prevention and intervention programs for children and youth who are neglected, delinquent, or at risk. So in Title I, Part A, under the Every Student Succeeds Act, school-wide programs are a key tool for using Title I funds to improve academic achievement and enable a school to use its federal funds effectively to upgrade its entire educational program. We do have another possibility in here that's called a targeted assistance program, which is a little different, but for the purposes of this program, of this presentation, I just decided to keep it very high level. Because most of our schools in Kentucky are school-wide programs. We have very, very few targeted assistance, but it is another option under Title I, Part A. In a school-wide program, an LEA or a school district may use Title I funds to implement strategies to upgrade the entire educational program of the school. And the school does not have to identify particular students as eligible to participate. And there are a couple of references there in the Every Student Succeeds Act and a link there to some frequently asked questions and some guidance that you can also refer to. Title I, Part A funds, we have a lot of schools in Kentucky that receive these funds. Schools do have some flexibility in how the funds are used, but the strategies must support the needs of students in the school as identified through a comprehensive needs assessment and is articulated in the school-wide plan or the CSIP. In designing and implementing the school-wide plan, a school must implement strategies that provide opportunities for all children to meet challenging state academic standards. They must use methods and instructional strategies that strengthen the academic program in the school, increase the amount and quality of learning time, and help provide an enriched and accelerated curriculum. And the use of funds, the school-wide plan must implement strategies that address the needs of all students, but particularly those who are at risk of not meeting challenging state academic standards. So here are some examples of uses of Title I-A funds. These are funds don't have to only be used for reading and math, as you can see here, although they can be used that way. They don't have to be used just for remediation either. They can be used to upgrade the entire educational program in the school in order to raise the achievement of the lowest achieving students and they have to be used to address the needs that are identified in the needs assessment. So you can see there's a wide variety of ways that funds could be used, and it really does depend on the needs of the school and the school plan. So now let's go to Title I, Part C. And as I mentioned before, this is for the education of migratory students. So this part is to assist states in supporting high quality and comprehensive educational programs and services during the school year and, as applicable, during summer or intersession periods that address the unique educational needs of migratory children. The purpose is to ensure that migratory children who move amongst the states are not penalized in any manner by disparities among the states in curriculum, graduation requirements, and challenging state academic standards, to ensure migratory children receive full and appropriate opportunities to meet the same challenging state academic standards that all children are expected to meet, to help migratory children overcome educational disruption, cultural and language barriers, social isolation, various health-related problems, and other factors that inhibit the ability of such children to succeed in school, and to help migratory children benefit from state and local systemic reforms. So next, let's talk about what is a migratory child. A migratory child is not older than 21 years of age, is entitled to a free public education or maybe younger than school age, and made a qualifying move with, as, or to join a migratory agricultural worker within the last 36 months. And so these are a few examples of the services that could be offered to a migrant student. The services vary by district. Not all districts offer transportation, for example. Services are supplementary in addition to the regular education program all students receive. This is a very unique program because in Kentucky, students are served all year, including in the summer. Summer is an important time where the program can make a lot of impact. We have some outstanding summer programs here in Kentucky, some of which, for example, coordinate with local colleges to impact the students. Students stay in dorm rooms, attend classes, work on their goals, and improve computer skills. There are also summer programs for younger students, where program staff may go to students' homes and do one-on-one tutoring, or they may offer an on-site summer program. The programs try to utilize existing summer feeding programs so that every student gets a free meal while they're attending summer school. Now let's talk about Title I, Part D. This is a prevention and intervention program for children and youth who are neglected, delinquent, or at risk. And then here are a couple of definitions of what we mean by neglected and delinquent. And then on the next slide, we have a definition of what an at-risk student. So the term neglected, when used with respect to a child, youth, or student, means an individual who has been committed to an institution other than a foster home, or voluntarily placed under an applicable state law due to abandonment, neglect, or death of the student's parents or guardians. The term delinquent, when used with respect to a child, youth, or student, means an individual who resides in a public or private residential facility other than a foster home that is operated for the care of children and youth who have been adjudicated delinquent, court-ordered, or in need of supervision. And then at risk, students are used, this term is used with respect to a child, youth, or student who is a school-age individual who is at risk of academic failure, has dependency adjudication or delinquency adjudication, has a drug or alcohol problem, is pregnant or is a parent, has come into contact with the juvenile justice system or child welfare system in the past, is at least 1 year behind the expected grade level for the age of the individual, has limited English proficiency, is a gang member, has dropped out of school in the past, or has high absenteeism rate at school. So Title I, Part D, it has two subparts. Subpart 1 are programs that are run by the Department of Juvenile Justice and the Department of Corrections. And then the subpart 2 are programs that are run by school districts. So you can see some examples of what neglected programs and delinquent and at-risk programs on this slide. And here are the goals of the Title I Part D program. First, to improve educational services for children so that they have the opportunity to meet challenging state academic content and achievement standards. Provide neglected and delinquent youth a successful transition from institutionalization to further school or employment. To prevent youth who are at risk from dropping out of school, and to provide youth who have dropped out and youth returning from correctional facilities with a support system to ensure their continued education. And with each of these programs, Subpart 1 and 2, funds are provided to help achieve the goals of the program. So here we are going to talk a little bit about the KDE state responsibility for oversight of Title I programs. And this is one of the areas of which we want to get your feedback and your input. First, the state educational agency is responsible for the oversight of these federal grants, such as Title I, Parts A, C, and D. So we review and approve applications. Districts must submit applications for how they're going to use their funds. And we have staff here that review those applications, provide technical assistance for districts when they have questions. And then the ultimate goal is to get the application approved so that the district has access and can use those funds and implement their program. We provide monitoring of programs to make sure that not only do we look for successes and areas of effectiveness, but we're required to monitor and just to ensure that the programs are being implemented and that requirements are being met so that programs are compliant. And we hope that we can also offer technical assistance and guidance and help with effectiveness as well. So we provide technical assistance, and then our other role is we must submit accurate data to the federal government. So we must ensure the proper use of grant funds and that programs support the purpose and intent of Title I. So our role is as a service agency that provides resources and guidance to our public schools and districts. And the department also serves as the state liaison for federal education requirements and funding opportunities. So we provide guidance through our web pages, through direct technical assistance to schools and districts, webinars, newsletters, and professional learning opportunities. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, we've provided a lot of special guidance for Title I programs designed to help districts administer their programs during the pandemic. Title I Parts A and C, Title I Part C especially, has developed a lot of guidance, as you could probably see if you had a chance to go look in the Google Drive folder. And it's that effectiveness and the timeliness of the guidance that we would like your feedback on, which will now bring us to our last agenda item. All right, so I'm going to, let me see if I can make this a little smaller so we can still see the questions, but see each other as well. We may not. Hopefully you all were able to have a copy of that. Maybe if you could pull that PowerPoint up on your desktop and look at those questions, but I'm happy to read those to you as well. So the questions for discussion are, first of all, you should have received a link to the Google folder with copies of the guidance that KDE provided to districts to help with during the pandemic. And I would love to get some discussion on these questions. You don't have to respond to every single one of them. If there's some you aren't sure about, that's totally fine. The list is just a guide, so we don't need to go straight down the list and answer those, but if we could, ideally what would be great is if we could have people to respond to whatever questions they would like and then respond to each other, maybe ask each other questions or react to something that someone else has said. So not a report to me necessarily, but more a discussion amongst the members would be the ideal goal. But, whatever feedback you have is valuable to us. So, I'll probably be jotting down a few notes. This is, just because we do value your feedback and want to, make a note of that and have a record of it for our own improvement. Hopefully we'll be able to dig deeper into some of the topics. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask those. We have lots of time remaining in our meeting time, so I'm going to open the floor up and let me just read down the list of the questions. So we had very, very sparse introductions at the beginning. So if you would like to respond to your role and your main duties with Title I, how COVID-19 affected your program implementation, your experience with the KDE COVID-19 related Title I guidance. So for example, the timeliness of that guidance, what was helpful to your program, what was maybe not that helpful in the guidance. Is there any guidance still needed on a particular topic? What suggestions would you have for improvement? And what worked and should be continued? So any of those questions that you would like to address, that will make that will be super helpful to us at KDE as we work to implement and provide oversight to the program. So I'm going to see if I can stop sharing, and if you all please make sure that you have your video on and your mic unmuted so that we can all see and hear each other. And now I will just open the floor for discussion on that. And if nothing else, we can start with just more introductions about role and a little bit about what you do in your role related to Title I. That might be a good place to start.
So I just once again got into the Google Drive and I'm seeing migratory documents and that's it.
There's a folder with the migrant, and then there's one document that it should have a link to a web page for the Title I Part A, and I think there might have been a English learner question on that page too. But most of the Title I Part A guidance was in that web page.
Thank you, I see it.
Okay.
Hi, Tara. Good morning. This is Lisa Schultz. I'll be happy to start. I was a little bit later hopping on this morning. I'm Lisa Schultz. I'm Superintendent of Schools for the Archdiocese of Louisville, and I currently serve on this committee as non-public school liaison. I also serve as chairperson of the Kentucky Non-Public Schools Commission, which is a group that is representative of all of the different types of non-public schools in the state of Kentucky. The one thing that I would like to share in my role as superintendent of the Archdiocese of Louisville is working with all of the local public school districts where we have Catholic schools here in the state, which would be 7 different counties and at least 7 different public school systems. The one thing that we found with COVID-19 was the sharing of information and about whether it be anything associated with the CARES Act funding that needed knowledge about Title I and or the carryover provisions. Our schools found that there was very good communication between our public school district colleagues and our Catholic schools located within those districts. So it was very helpful to us to be able to know that services were still going to be able to be provided and that there were some carryover provisions for some of those funds. One of the suggestions that I would have is always in the area of communication between our non-public schools and public schools in the state is to continue to talk about the consultation process and make sure that our public school districts are aware of reaching out and making contact with the non-public schools in their districts so that they're aware of the programs that are available and have the opportunity, to participate specifically in Title I. That might be probably the least used of all of the other programs by non-public schools, but I think that education and information is always appropriate and needed.
Thank you.
Dr. Rodriguez, this is Brian Bowen. I'm DPP in McCracken County and served on this committee for a couple of years now, and really more probably from the Part D perspective, because we do host one of the 8 juvenile detentions across the state. We service the, I think we're up to 18 most western counties. We reach everything from Henderson to Christian County all the way to the river counties to Fulton and Hickman. I do have a clarifying question as we approach child counts and such. Does the state get a set amount of dollars and then they're distributed based on the number of eligible students? Or does the federal government just designate a specific dollar figure per student? And then that's what determines what the state of Kentucky gets?
And I may need David to jump in on this one because he's more familiar with Title I Part D than I am, but the state gets an allocation and then we have some different rules that we have to follow here as we distribute that. So there's some funding that's taken for administration for the state administration, and then the rest is distributed to the districts. David, do you want to weigh in on how that? Do you have anything else to add to how that works?
The neglected portion of well, any district that serves a neglected institution or has neglected students, those students are actually counted within the Title I Part A funding formula. And then what we do is we kind of break that out to determine what the maximum set aside would be for those particular kids. And then on for delinquent programs, there is a formula that's used based on what amount we get minus any administrative costs, and then we take out that off the top, and then serve based on a per pupil basis essentially.
But that's not but that number doesn't fluctuate really year to year.
Yeah, it does fluctuate.
For example, well, for example, let's say that based on the child count, we had 3,000 students that were determined to be delinquent in the state of Kentucky. Does the 3,000 go into that total amount? And then so that number fluctuates based on what the count is. And so let's say that this year we came in at 1,500. Just hypothetically, that could potentially double our funding amount because there's only 1,500 in the state.
Yeah, potentially, but you have to understand our allocation does vary year to year as well. So yes, it depends on how much. Yeah, you're basically, you're taking a piece of the pie, and that depends on what your piece is versus everybody else as well.
Yeah, so this brings me to the point, and this would be Part A and Part D, well, Part C, I guess, as well. The concern I have with COVID are 2 parts. Number one, in Part D programs, and DJJ establishes them, the county doesn't make that choice. It's not like McCracken County just applied to have a juvenile detention center to host 18 counties. And so you take other organizations that may take dependent children. The county, the school system, or the independent school system doesn't make that choice. And so I think that we're getting ready to see numbers decrease. I think statistically we have seen that the number of abuse cases, I think the last that I had seen was reported was 25% down. We know that because kids have not been in school, those cases are decreasing. Well, we can say, and we think, and I believe it probably to be true, we're seeing that decrease because they're not in school, getting eyes laid on them. And so my point in that is that you're going to have that. You're going to have court systems have dramatically shut down. They've gone so virtual. They've delayed so many cases. You're going to see there are delinquent kids out there. They're just not in the facilities. And the point in this is that we still have to operate those programs.
Mhm.
And those are programs that we service other school districts with. And so I'm really concerned about the funding of those programs as we move forward, because basically we're going to start really tapping into our own local tax dollars to be able to continue funding those programs, with the fear that those numbers are going to come in down so much. Even when I submitted my October report, I had to write a rationale in return as to why we had a dramatic drop in delinquent kids. Well, I can't answer that because I can't answer for 18 different, counties and their district judges or circuit courts. The other major concern I have with just Part A is the number of students that are going to homeschool. We've seen a dramatic increase in the number of students in our district that have gone to homeschool, that they still don't want to do the virtual piece. They're going to go to homeschool. I'm just really concerned that we're going to have this dramatic economic impact we won't see this year, but potentially see next year. And that's why I asked that question. Is it a pot of money, then you just get your piece of that pie? Or does the federal government say, okay, for every person in this particular category, you get X number of dollars?
Yeah, for your neglected and delinquent counts, those are neglected. Delinquent counts are based on an actual count of kids. Neglected is not. Neglected is based on Census Bureau estimates, which would include estimates of the number of kids within your district that are neglected and delinquent foster kids, kids that potentially would even attend private schools or home schools. And those estimates are based on things such as community surveys, based on participation in welfare programs, tax return data, and things of that nature. So the homeschool factor probably is not going to affect your district as much as you think, because those kids would be included in your estimates as long as they're within your district's boundaries. On the other hand, I think it's a good point and good perspective on the delinquent programs, which Tara's taken some notes. I can see her taking notes on that. We can kind of see what kind of feedback and guidance we get in the future from the U.S. Department of Education.
I agree with that, and thank you for sharing those concerns. Ms. Hibbs has put in the chat that she has the same concern that you have talked about, Mr. Boland, that they had a decrease in their child count also. So like David said, this is very helpful to us to know. It kind of speaks to the question about where additional guidance is possibly needed. And so that's real helpful for us to know, and we have made note of that.
I'm going to make a leap and say that's probably an issue across the nation at this point.
And I think that the concern would be that people that serve on budgeting committees at the federal or state level could easily say, well, there's a decrease, we need to remove that money. Well, we're going to see the tide turn once everything we get through the pandemic. You're going to see more students re-enroll. You're going to see more cases be reported, along with several of these students that originally went to homeschool are now back. I would suspect that the tide would turn, and I just would hate for us to have this enormous shortfall because of the fact that it's based off of our numbers this year. And I know that those people take those things in consideration, but anything that we can do to continue to push that point of emphasis to those decision makers would be much appreciated on behalf of the school districts.
Good morning. My name is Michael Ham. I'm one of the regional directors for the Migrant Education Program. We have 4 regional administrative centers across the state that actually work with the districts in those regions, whether they be what we call standalone districts, where they generate enough money to have their own standalone program, or non-standalone, which are districts that have less numbers, and those are served directly from the regional office. With what I saw from the guidance that was given, I think it was very timely. Of course, there was one, as someone mentioned earlier, we had some very specific questions that we asked for the migrant education program, and it was very helpful to get that guidance back, because then it really helped us, because like everyone else with federal programs, we have the concern where our students, the way we generate the funding and allocation for them is if they move across school district lines. Well, in this pandemic era, there's still moving going on, but in the beginning, partially through the summer, there was not a lot of movement at all. And when we couldn't make home visits or to do those interviews and some of those pieces, it really put us at alarm of what it would look like our future as well for what we had. But the federal Department of Education has worked with this. They've been very good as well, providing their own guidance to the states to disseminate to us. And I think overall everything has been worked well for us, and we're seeing our numbers increase more. But then it's also a challenge too, because of every school district governs themselves, whether they have been in person or virtual or homeschool, and where a lot of our work takes place in the homes. It's definitely been some challenges and put some barriers up for us, but we've been able to work through those a little bit better than we were in the spring, and I think we're set in a good place now with the guidance we have. So we've been thankful for that from KDE and from the federal Department of Education as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go. I'm Christina Dalton, and I'm new on this committee, so it's my first meeting. I am the district social worker in Davis County Public Schools, so I work with 18 schools that we have, and my background is I was family resource coordinator for 3 elementary schools, so I have about 20 years in the education system and 3 years in this new position. I know some of our concerns is that we're not seeing as many kids, we feel like we're unable to meet a lot of those student needs because of lack of consistency, I guess. And so some of the caseloads are down, but as far as family needs, those are extremely up. Lots of family needs, and also, just a lot of stuff in terms of mental health, as much for parents, but really a whole lot with staff as well that we're seeing across the district. So I'm still kind of I'm learning a little bit on this, and where my role with families, I feel like falls into the Title I. I had a question on, like you talked about the targeted assistance, that a lot of school districts don't do that. Is there a reason why they don't do that? Is it because you have to the identification process more?
Yes, they have to identify the students who will receive the services under targeted assistance, and then they have to monitor the progress of those particular students. So, targeted assistance, in general, the schools that use that are lower in poverty, so they would be below the 40% mark, and so those and because they're in order to have a school-wide program, if they're a very low poverty school, they have to get a waiver. So we have just a handful of schools that use targeted assistance, and then the majority are school-wide program if they're served with those funds.
Okay.
So thank you for sharing.
I'm Cheryl Tanner, and I'm a migrant advocate and recruiter for Webster County Schools. We've had to totally restructure how we provide services starting in the summer.
Historically, we've offered a large site-based program. That was eliminated this year, and we provided services at the home. Takes so much more resources to do that effectively. And going forward, I don't know if there's funding to take care of all of the students' needs in that type of a way. So if it doesn't change, we'll have to make tough decisions who we provide services in the summer and then who we're not able to help.
Well, my name is David Milanti. I'm the Assistant Director in the Division of School and Program Improvement. I work directly with Tara in administering several of the programs under the Every Student Succeeds Act, but I'm serving here because I am the
Can you all hear?
No.
I think you might be muted.
Sorry, I was muted. I went through a whole spiel.
We heard that. I think we heard the beginning of it. We heard the beginning of it, and then it's suddenly muted.
Yeah, I don't know why that was. So again, my name's David Milanti. How much did you hear, Tara?
Where you talked about, you started to say your role on the committee is as the ombudsman.
Yeah, so my role is the ombudsman, and generally what I do is ensure that equitable services are provided across several programs to private schools and home schools within the state, and then provide guidance on that, and through the CARES Act. I work a lot with homeschools and other non-public schools who call with questions about services they may be provided, and I do the same for districts as well, as they have questions about how to actually implement services. And then I work across programs within the department to ensure that their procedures and processes for administering programs that require equitable services are accurate and correct.
Does anybody else want to share? Oh, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Hatfield. I am the Southgate Independent Schools chairperson, and that's my official role on this committee as a school board member. But I am not, my involvement in public education is in currently my 40th year. So you were talking about the targeted assisted, Christina. 25 years ago, I took on a role with the Regional Core Service Center. That was Title I. And at that point in time, 25 years ago, the federal government decreased the level for school-wide, and they lowered it down to 50. And there were so many schools and districts chose to go school-wide, and that opened up. And so since then, since those 25 years, the number of targeted assisted has decreased, because from my view that schools want to use the dollars to impact the highest need students from poverty, and oftentimes they focus it on elementary level and then the schools. So that shift now has been going for 25 years. Way back then in 25 years, there were a lot of targeted assisted schools, and there are probably very few. I served as the Title I coordinator for Newport Independent Schools before I retired in 2017. And now I work at the Northern Kentucky Cooperative for Educational Services. And I have the pleasure of meeting with all of the Title I coordinators from the region on a monthly basis. So my understanding now of what they're doing is from how can I pull them together and support them, and lots of questions on how to work cooperatively with our private schools. In Northern Kentucky, we have 16 independent districts, or 16 districts. 11 of those are independent. So, and that means our private schools oftentimes deal with multiple independent and multiple districts to support those services. And we do have a good relationship with the Diocese of Covington. Often we started that a couple years ago, where we would meet with them and let them join our meetings so that we would have the same message to private schools. So during the pandemic, it's been a challenge. And a lot of the conversation that they've had about has been around the CARES money and how to do that, and the challenges that came upon the lawsuit that then was dismissed, and how that. But I feel like people have gotten past that at this point in time and have figured out how to document that. So that's been very helpful. And a lot of concerns about, as you shared, the mental health concerns of the families, the students, the staff, as well as how to do the best to meet the parent engagement requirements that are there and how to make that happen. So there's definitely struggles in the parent involvement world at this time.
That is something that we've heard over and over again from districts, is about the parent and family engagement.
They're trying.
Yeah.
But it's not easy right now. Yeah.
Yep.
And I also oversaw a Title I Part D delinquent center, one of those. So I understand some of your challenges that you have staff, and you're employed the staff, and how much that funding might impact you. So.
All right. Does anybody else want to share? You don't have to, but we still have plenty of time.
I have just a question on what Diane was talking about with that parent engagement piece. Is there anything from the department where they share, like, what other districts are doing to meet that, like how they're meeting that parent engagement piece?
I have not seen any guidance from the federal government on that. I have, on some calls with them, I've explained to them that what we're hearing from our districts is that they want specifics. Like, they understand what the requirement is, but they want specifics on, like, how can I best do this one thing. They want specific examples, and they're really asking for to hear from, like you mentioned, examples that other districts are actually using successfully. That is very hard to come by, even amongst our own districts, but we're working on that. That's one thing that, because we've heard that so consistently, that they want to know specific examples of what others are doing during the pandemic to try to meet these requirements. But in answer to your question again, no, I really haven't seen. There are here and there, if you do a search, you can find some examples of districts in other states, but I just haven't seen like a really strong central place where you can get specifics like that.
I was just curious. I know, because that they're doing amazing, like everybody's doing amazing things across the state. And I know a lot of times Family Resource and Youth Service Centers title with Partner One, and they're being so creative, in how to reach parents and make that connection. So I know that I don't know how you would do it, but I know that there's, great advice and things going on out there.
Thank you. That's a good point.
If I may add, one of the things that I know we all have, the servicing of kids, of course, Title I Part A being the bigger piece of that, but it's been tough with migrant education because we're a supplemental program. And so where we have kids that are identified as priority for service, and of course, most of that is based on assessment scores at risk of failing. And of course, when we didn't have state assessments to base that on this year, we've had to look at local assessments to see if we can identify those kids as best we can. However, what we typically do in the school system is we will identify those supplemental services already in place. So if there's a after-school math tutoring 2 days a week, then our job is to get our kids in that. And so, and then if we need to do additional things at home to help support that, we've been able to do that. Now the challenge that we have is that a lot of districts facing their own challenges, but they're pushing that back to us. And of course, if we can't do home visits, and we're doing as much as we can, of course, being very innovative with the virtual piece as well. But providing those services has definitely been a challenge to those Priority for Needs, because we have established where we have to provide so many services per week and document those. And of course, that's part of our federal guidance as well. But some of the districts are, it's been tough because we are supplemental and they're looking for us to provide some services that typically we can't do. And so it's hard to explain to some, but also reminding them, we are supplemental, and that's what takes place. The other piece of it that I liked about the guidance that was provided by KDE on Title I overall is that we were able to, as regional administrators, be able to look at those and help guide our districts through technical assistance. If they came to us and said, hey, we need, these 2 kids don't have internet service at home. Well, if we knew by the guidance that we've been given and information from KDE, knowing what those CARES funds were and how those were distributed, and knowing what services that those CARES funds could provide, has definitely helped us to be able to reach back out to the districts, and where they've tried to have migrant maybe use funds to pay for things, we'll be able to look at the districts and find other ways to do that through CARES funds they've done for their general student stream. So again, good information provided overall. I think it's been very helpful to the migrant program.
Thank you, Michael. All right. Does anybody else want to share? Also, if you have any comments or feedback or questions about any of the content that we've talked about today. Okay. Well, if not, this is last chance, but if not, I'm totally happy if anybody else wants to share. If not, we will conclude the meeting in just a minute. As far as the next meeting, we try to have these on an as-needed basis. So when we, when we need to get feedback from the committee, sometimes it might be through an email, but sometimes if we have some items that have a lot more substance to them, a lot more content, we'll call a meeting. So I don't know exactly when that would be. Probably, I would guess maybe in the spring sometime, but I'll try to give everybody plenty of notice on that. Anybody else have anything, any last minute parting thoughts or questions? Okay, well, I really want to thank all of you for joining today. I appreciate your time and your expertise and your discussions. Thank you so much for bringing your questions. It was really nice to talk to all of you. I'll be following up with you probably with some additional materials and so on. And if you continue to have any other questions, you can still submit those to me. Any comments, any feedback, submit those to me directly through my email address, and I'll be glad to make note of those and find an answer for you if that is what is needed. So thank you so much for joining the meeting today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.